Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're taking a look at the 20 worst video games to ever come from the Star Wars franchise. Before we get started, we post new videos all week long, so be sure to subscribe to MojoPlays and ring that bell to be notified about our latest videos. Star Wars Super Bombad Racing. A Star Wars kart racer would absolutely work on paper, even if you're basing most of it around just one of the movies. But Super Bombad Racing was not the right way to go about it. For a game that was really trying to get the kids on board, Super Bombad Racing is super oppressive with its obscene amounts of rubber banding and bombardment of projectiles no matter how well the player is doing. The tracks are somewhat decent in their layouts, but when the AI is as aggressive as it is, well, who exactly is this game for? That alone makes this among the worst of the Star Wars video games, and it only goes downhill from here, folks. Star Wars Galaxies. Star Wars is no stranger to MMORPGs. Just look at how well the Old Republic did during its run. Star Wars Galaxies, on the other hand, was anything but special. This was one of those games where you were sort of expected to just drop in and start living a second life. Choose a race, choose a profession, and just live in the Star Wars universe. Sounds great until you realize there really isn't much to do. Not even the combat was enticing, as it was just flying around and clicking a few times. Sony and LucasArts wound up letting their contracts expire, thus forcing Sony to shut the game down. We suppose you could consider this the No Man's Sky of Star Wars minus the questionable marketing. Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars has seen a couple of remarkable strategy games, but Rebellion was a major step backwards. The thing is that it wasn't because the game was broken or imbalanced. You see, the big challenge in developing something as complex as a strategy game is figuring out how you're supposed to teach players your game and try to ease them into the gameplay loop. Therein lies the problem with Rebellion. In addition to poorly explaining its own mechanics, Rebellion is insanely hard the moment you start your first game, with an aggressive AI and a UI that makes everything hard to comprehend what is where and who needs what. Only those who stuck with it found enjoyment with it, but for most, Rebellion was expecting far too much with a mess of a UI. Star Wars Hunters. We don't get awful Star Wars games often, but in the modern era, Star Wars Hunters is among the worst. If you want to do a hero shooter, then fine. The least you can do is make the gameplay interesting. So why the Phantom Menace did you throw away any potential you had just to make the game a boring slog of team deathmatch? And why does it run like a shredder trying to chew through rubber? Oh, right, it's a free-to-play title only available on Switch and mobile, the two biggest potatoes on the market. We'll never understand why Zynga bothered developing this if it wasn't going to more than 2 platforms. Star Wars Episode 1: The Gungan Frontier. The Gungans aren't exactly the most popular alien race in Star Wars. We all know who to blame for that.
No, Mr. Stay. Mr. called Jar Jar Binks. Mr. your humble servant.
That won't be necessary.
Oh, but it is.
So why center an entire game on them? Oh, it's to promote environmentalism and teach kids about ecology and biology. Sure, this could be more enjoyable if Jar Jar wasn't interrupting and commentating on our actions every few seconds, and if maybe the game actually took some time to teach its subject matter. Really, it all winds up just being nothing more than mindlessly placing plant life, wildlife, and making sure no one kills each other. Not much at stake here, and not much to make this memorable in any way. Star Wars: The Force Unleashed 2.
Vader thinks he's turned you, but I can sense your future.
It's almost hard to call Force Unleashed 2 a bad game. After all, it plays very similarly to its predecessor. However, it's everything it doesn't do right that makes the game dreadful, particularly its story and pacing. The game is only about 3 hours long and has a plot that makes very little sense in how you're getting from point A to point B and why. What about the two choices at the very end of the game? Well, no matter if you choose the good or evil ending, The Force Unleashed 2 kills you off in the dumbest ways imaginable. Yeah, definitely not the sequel we had hoped for after a banger of a first game. Star Wars: The New Droid Army. The Game Boy Advance was a rough platform for good Star Wars games. Case in point, the new Droid Army. Story-wise, we'd be down for a fun spin-off story about the Empire trying to make an unstoppable army of droids. Gameplay-wise, it's an absolute snooze fest of a game. Most of your objectives boil down to go here, kill these enemies, go there, kill these enemies, and then the level ends. What slows the game down even more is the fact that you can't recover force power or stamina unless you stand still. Video games are supposed to be fun, aren't they? Star Wars: Rebel Assault. An on-rail shooter such as this would make for a decent Star Wars game. After all, many fans have fantasized about reliving scenes from the movies from their own perspective. The thing is, that's all Rebel Assault has going for it. Relive a few key moments from the movies, and after about an hour or two, that's it. You've experienced everything the game has to offer after a single playthrough. There's no secret levels, no missions with different ships to pilot, not even a shiny gold star on the title screen. In the end, you spent how much money for a short kiddie ride of a game? Hopefully not too much. Star Wars: The Clone Wars Republic Heroes.
War isn't about glory, young one. Jedi don't seek adventure.
Even though the art style of the Clone Wars animated series was great in both its original 2D version and later the 3D version, it may not translate as well into the world of video games. Republic Heroes is a prime example of this. See, while the Clone Wars was simplistic in its own character models, it still held some really great lighting, shadowing, and texture work that gave the show its own unique look. In 2009, video games couldn't match that quality, and Republic Heroes suffered for it. The game just looks unfinished with its lack of texture and proper lighting. Even worse, it was a comically easy platforming game that would bore any player, even the little toddlers. No one wanted this when previous games let us become Jedi, Sith, bounty hunters, and more. Star Wars Episode II: Attack of the Clones. God help you if this was the only Star Wars game you had for your Game Boy Advance. Attack of the Clones is the worst handheld game to ever infect the Star Wars name. Most levels are spent pushing right on the D-pad and mashing B to smack enemies over the head with your lightsaber. And that's all you do. In those 60 minutes of playtime, Attack of the Clones is nothing more than move right, attack, move right, attack. At least New Droid Army gave players some kind of exploration with wide areas. This? You seriously expect rundown Star Fox type levels are enough to break up the monotony of moving right? Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. This game has a section where you have to protect Jar Jar Binks. Oh, you need more reasons? Alright, The Phantom Menace should have made for some great gaming environments since it featured things like pod racing and the Gungan War. That's if you can actually see anything that's going on, since the game features a frustratingly constricting top-down camera angle. The The result left players in a paranoid frenzy, frantically shooting and slashing in hopes of hitting something, anything. We know that we're not supposed to trust our eyes according to ObiWan, but this game took the advice a little too literally. Star Wars Force Commander.
State your request. Ready for attack order, sir.
This entry is mostly an example of what could have been. This real-time strategy from the year 2000 actually had a promising story to it. The plot was to follow an Imperial officer's defection from the Empire to the Rebel forces. However, the game's development took far too long, shifting from 2D graphics to 3D early in its design phase.
Stand by. ATPG ready, sir. ATPG moving out.
By the time of its release, the game's specs just couldn't match up to its competition. The once ambitious project was panned by critics for its blocky design, laggy controls, balancing issues, and an awkward soundtrack that featured techno versions of the original score. No, seriously, just listen to it. Star Wars ObiWan. In the early 2000s, game studios were breaking their necks to cash in on the Star Wars prequels by pumping out games as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, the legendary Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi was no exception, getting his very own game for the first Xbox console. The hasty production showed its face rather quickly in the form of frustrating controls, uninspired combat movements, and voice acting that is sure to give you the giggles. But hey, at least we could actually see what was going on this time. Although Obi-Wan doesn't believe in luck, he sure seemed to run out of it by starring in this title.
There's an Elcar transport station nearby.
No, Jedi cheeky huevo.
Star Wars Demolition. Creators of this game swore that it wasn't just Twisted Metal with a Star Wars body kit. Soon after its release, however, gamers discovered that, that's exactly what it was. While a large amount of flack this release got was its copycat concept, it would have been slightly forgiven if it was actually a good game. The graphics were subpar, the physics were counterintuitive, and buggy environments led to players getting trapped mid-level. The worst part was the game's plot, which tried to justify why a demolition derby would occur in the Star Wars universe. Good luck explaining why Darth Maul and an adult Boba Fett would both exist at the same time. Star Wars Jedi Arena. While we've made it clear that Star Wars games were bad in the early 2000s, this game was bad even by early 1980 standards. Released in the months leading up to the infamous video game crash of 1983, Jedi Arena embodied many of gaming's flaws at the time. The game was based on a single scene in A New Hope where Luke practices lightsaber combat, and it shows. The objective is for players to control a stationary Jedi as they use lightsabers to deflect laser blasts towards their opponent. And that's kind of it. While it can give a dose of nostalgia to older fans, the honeymoon won't last long once players get bored again after about 5 minutes. Star Wars Flight of the Falcon. While most developers knew that 3D on the Game Boy Advance was a gamble, the creators of this game apparently didn't get the memo. In fact, this seemed like a title that was never meant to be on handheld altogether. Flight of the Falcon was supposed to be a Star Fox-styled piloting experience that fans could conveniently play on the go. However, what they actually got was a blurry, lag-infested disappointment. The difficulty would rocket from episode 1 boring to nearly impossible without warning, and the save checkpoints were spaced so far apart that players would have to go hours at a time to keep their progress. So basically the opposite of what a portable release is supposed to be. Star Wars Jedi Power Battles. The turn of the millennium strikes again. If you haven't been counting, this is the 5th entry that was released early in the 2000s. In many ways, Jedi Power Battles has a lot in common with the movie it's based on. The concept is interesting, but it quickly becomes a frustrating mess that's in no way memorable. The excitement of taking control of a notable Jedi from the franchise is immediately crushed due to aggravatingly bad controls and subpar graphics. Most players reported not even being able to make it past the first level due to the clunky gameplay. Oh yeah, and did we mention it was also released on the Game Boy Advance? No thanks. Star Wars Masters of Teras Kasi. While a Star Wars fighting game sounds like a great idea, fans of the franchise probably should have listened to Admiral Akbar. This once promising project during the golden age of fighting games ultimately fell to the dark side. Insanely unbalanced characters, frame detection issues, and subpar graphics not only made this one of the worst Star Wars games, but one of the worst fighting games ever. Even the members of the popular Team 4-Star couldn't help but laugh at how bad the release was. Any game that features Boba Fett using Kung Fu and reduces lightsabers to clubbing devices deserves to land at number 3 on this list. Star Wars Yoda Stories. Released as part of LucasArts' desktop adventure series, Yoda Stories was marketed to be a Zelda-styled experience in the Star Wars universe. What audiences actually ended up with was very little Yoda and even less of a story or game. The game was a series of randomly generated objectives with no centralized plot. What's worse is that the formula of continuous fetch quests stayed the same regardless of what level the player was on. The repetitive scavenger hunts frustrated buyers and critics alike, leading to Yoda Stories becoming one of the lowest rated games in the franchise's history. Star Wars Kinect. If you think the holiday special was the most cringeworthy thing to come out of Star Wars, it still was, but this comes really close. Some of this title's minigames, such as lightsaber combat and force training, were decent ideas that only fell flat due to the Kinect's motion capture. However, nothing in the entire galaxy far, far away could justify the galactic dance-off. The game mode let players synchronize real-life dance movements with famous characters from the series. Nothing embodies Han Solo more than the scruffy-looking nerf herder breaking it down while singing that he's, Han Solo. Just like the added Jedi rock scene in the special edition, this was something that we couldn't unsee. Did you get the chance to play any of these Star Wars games for yourself? Be sure to let us know down in the comments. Be sure to check out these other fun clips from MojoPlays, and if you enjoy our content, leave us a like, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.